sipping whiskey from a paper cup. You drown your sorrows till you can't stand up. And take a look at what you've done to yourself. Why don't you put the bottle back on the shelf? Yellow-fingered from your cigarettes. Your hands are shaking while your body sweats. Why don't you look into Jesus? He got the answer.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Why God. Ryan and I are excited. This is our first Why God of 2024. We've got some great guests lined up for this year that we're excited about. But today, Ryan's got a guest that I want you to introduce, if you don't mind, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and introduce Nicole for us.
It would be my pleasure. Happy New Year, everybody. So we're happy to kick things off with a very good friend of mine, Nicole Cavarra. She was introduced to us through Rochelle Dietz and Craig Casca and over in Arizona, because she was like a snowbird. She would spend the winters in Arizona and the summers in Colorado, get the best of both worlds. And I kept hearing about Nicole from Rochelle, about like how she was just really great with the members. And Rochelle had mentioned something to me that like Nicole had some sort of experience. It was like a health issue, and I'm not going to butcher it or steal your thunder, but the gist of it was when she said something, it always stuck to me. But like when she came out of it, she saw like the golf swing differently, and it kind of took her to the next level on the teaching. And so I was always intrigued by that, and I always wanted to learn her story. That is really all I know of it. And so we're super excited to have Nicole on today and to give us a little bit more insight and fill in the blanks on things that I don't know. So that being said, Nicole, welcome. We're pleased to have you on as our first guest in 2024.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on here. So Nicole Cavarra, as you guys know, and I was born in a suburb of Denver, just between Parker and Centennial. So back then it was kind of an awesome place to grow up for different reasons than it is now, I'm sure. It was out in the boonies a little bit, as we called it, but you could drive 25, 30 minutes and be down in Denver and, go to a Broncos game or something like that. So we kind of had the best of all worlds. I got to do a lot of outdoor stuff, from hunting and fishing and, riding ATVs with my brothers, and we just were outside all the time. So I kind of grew up a little bit of a tomboy, and my dad was a football coach. And so I have two brothers, and we were all into all sports, and my parents were believers. We didn't really go to church. My parents were raised Roman Catholic. And so, for them, church was always sort of mandatory, just that. And not that there's anything wrong with it. It was actually a seed to their faith, and they each have their own experiences that they've come through because of that. But as they raised us, they, definitely wanted us to have a different way of coming into our relationship with the Lord. Reasons I bring up my older brother, he was really his life was really a catalyst to kind of my first understanding of sort of the power of faith and in God and holding on to, truth and hope. When he was, I think he was about 14 or 15, riding around on the dirt out there, he actually had an accident on I think it was a dirt bike. And I can't remember if it was a dirt bike or just a bike. I honestly can't remember. But anyway, they were jumping, the jump broke, and he got thrown up in the air and came back down, and he landed on his neck. So on his head, and he broke his neck. Fast forward, he went through a really challenging time, but he was not paralyzed, and ended up pulling through that, and was really able to lead a very normal life, other than they wouldn't let him play any of the contact sports anymore. So baseball, basketball, football were kind of out. He was later able to play like his junior and senior year basketball. But that is how we got into golf. So my dad saying like, hey, and we lived near a golf course, so it was right there, but we weren't really golfers. So, or my family, my dad wasn't either. He just was, like I said, he's very gifted, like seeing bodies and just could coach anything, and was, he played college football and was an All-American in baseball and football, and just had a gift for seeing things that other people couldn't see, especially back then. I mean, we didn't really have, these cameras like we can see now, but I always thought he could see everything in slow motion kind of thing, which I thought was super cool. So he decided to teach my brother golf. And that's how we got into it. When I was 4, 5, 6 years old, all the way through, watching my dad help my brother and kind of developing a sense of understanding of things that were going on. And then I remember one day watching my older brother though, and I said something like, "Oh, that was pretty good," but he just didn't release his hands or something, and I was just a little squat. And so my dad was like, "What did you say?" And I was like, "Oh, that he got it, but like he just didn't release his hands." And my dad looked at me like, "How did you see that?" kind of thing. And I was like, "Well, I don't know." So I figured I was starting to see things, in the golf swing, which was kind of cool, but didn't really think much of it until like later in life. So until
Isn't it crazy that was like the turning point of golf in your family, and then what ultimately was your career path and a huge part of your life, right? I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead, but that's incredible how that worked. Yeah.
And both my brothers actually became golf pros as well. So
wow.
Then they've both ventured off from there, but their life and their careers were really set in stone by that also. And I was young, but I remember being little and going to have to stay at my grandparents' house, and being so worried about my brother, just, crying all the time, but like, but praying for him. And so, even at like a young age, believing that like he would be okay. And, I don't really know, why or how that got there, but it just, so I did believe in prayer at a really young age. I mean, I can look back at and think about praying. And my husband's always like, "I can't believe you remember stuff from when you were like 4. I do. I remember a lot of things, like moments in time, but I do remember praying at a really young age. But, then moving on through life, right? We all have our struggles and our journeys, but it was always like, I feel like the Spirit was always very prevalent in my life from a young age. So,
That's generally how it works. Like people go through the crucible, like you get introduced to, your faith at an early age, and then you kind of venture away from it just because, whether it's the hustle or bustle of life or it's intentional, but then you go out and go through the crucible of life, and then something happens. And often, not all of our guests, but a lot of guests, there's like a point in time where they face something that's really hard, or there's something that's a real marker in their life that they end up turning to God. Was there anything like that happened to you, Nicole?
Yeah. So like fast forwarding that freshman year, like I think things started happening to me. Like I was never hurt or injured or sick. I blew my knee out hitting a golf ball. Didn't think much of it at the time, other than, are you kidding me? I don't know how that happened. I ended up having to have a sinus surgery. And this all happened in like 6 months. Like my dad had a heart attack, my knee blew out, had sinus surgery. I was super sick. Like I was just like, just let me go home for the summer. So I was trying to come through that, and was teaching just outside of Boulder at this course. And I was teaching this young boy. And I remember not feeling very well, but I was like, whatever, just, I think I'm hot. So I was just like, shake it off, get some Gatorade, I'm fine. And I dumped the bucket of balls out for him to hit. And I was like, man, I don't feel good. And I remember calling my aunt, because I was going to stay with him while I was coaching, and saying, I guess I'm not going to go play golf with the guys later, because we always just went out and played like, little betting matches or whatever after teaching. I said, I think I'm just going to come home. I don't feel well. She said, are you okay? And I said, yes, I'm fine, but I just need to come home and rest. And so I went back to teach the kid, and I remember thinking that somebody mugged me or something and hit me with a baseball bat, because I remember the pain in my head was so excruciating that I just grabbed my head and I was like, ah! I just like kind of screamed like, oh my gosh, it's hurting so bad. I literally thought someone hit me with a baseball bat, but I turned around and there was nobody there. So it's just myself and this young kid. Never saw the poor kid again. I think he was like 7 and I think he just ran home or something. I don't know. But I never saw him again. I probably mortified him. But as I was there, I just remember I was falling. I kept trying to stand up, but I finally just hit the deck. And we were kind of on like the back teaching range. So you kind of have your main teaching range by the clubhouse. And this was a range that was at the opposite end of the driving range. So like, I don't know, 400 yards away or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I remember in slow motion, the little kid's voice was like, are you all right? Like as I was falling down. And then that was it. That's all I remember. And so I went into like this state of, I don't know. I wasn't like looking down on myself, how some people describe, but I was in a place where all of a sudden the angst and like the churning and the anxiety and the urgency. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do that. Like you should see like my to-do list is like boom, 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 right? Like and it's like I got the whole thing dialed all the time, right? That's just how but there was none of that. It was just light and peaceful, and there was no angst. There was no pressure. There was no anything. It was the most peaceful, wonderful place I had ever been. And I remember being able to kind of have this conversation with, who I think is, is God. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here kind of thing. But he said hello to me and I said hi. And I couldn't see him. I could just hear him. And I said, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And it was kind of like, well, it's okay. Like, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to understand everything, Anyway, during this conversation, he had asked me if I wanted to stay. And I said, well, gosh, I don't really know. I'm like, I really love it here. Like, I don't want to leave here for sure. Like, this is amazing. I was like, but I didn't get to say goodbye to my family. I was like, I really want to say goodbye to my family. Like, I should have talked to them. And he was like, okay. And he's like, that's totally fine. It was just this conversation. It went on for a while. And the more he kind of let me stir in my own wants, I guess you could say, I said, I think there's things I really want to do that I didn't get to do. And he said, okay, so do you want to go back, basically? And I said, well, can I come back here? Like, I don't want to leave. I don't know. Do I have to? And he basically was like, there's no right or wrong. Because I had asked him, what am I supposed to do? Like, what do you want me to do? And he basically gave me the assurance that it wasn't a right or wrong. Like, it was super grateful. And I think that was the first time in my life that I had realized that it wasn't about doing what was right or wrong, like that it was like a gift, right? Like there was nothing wrong no matter what I chose. Like, his love was there. Mm-hmm. And that I was like baffled, right? Like, during this conversation, I'm like, I can't make the wrong choice here. Like, cause I'm kind of the person that always like colored between the lines, drive my car, like never got a ticket, like, and I'm sure that came from, my upbringing with my dad and stuff. And so, I really was like kind of baffled at the fact that I couldn't make a wrong choice at that moment. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, yeah, I do want to go back. And he said, okay. And I was like, okay, like, how do I get there? And then the tone changed and his tone became very directive. And he said 3 times, he said, get up, Nicole. And then there was like a pause. And then he said, get up, Nicole. And on the third time, he said, get up, Nicole. And I remember I was laying on the grass and my eyes opened. And then the panic and the urgency and the pain and everything of the world like came back. It was just like, it just swooped back into my body. And I was like, uh-oh, now I'm in trouble. Like, okay, now I've got to like fight to live. I could tell that I wasn't going to make it. Like I could feel, there was a feeling of like coming in and out of my own body, kind of like, I don't know what that is or how to describe that, other than I can honestly say I kept feeling as if I was going to die again, kind of thing.
Right.
And I didn't want to. And so I remember laying there and I couldn't hear. There was like a loud, muffled noise in my ears. And all I could see was very kaleidoscopish. Like I could see like the blue sky and the green grass, but everything was like super blurry. I couldn't make anything. And I tried to yell for help. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't make words. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do now. And so I remember like rocking back and forth and rolling over on my stomach and getting myself pushed up on my fours. And I remembered that there was a fence over to the side of the driving range. So I got over to the fence and I crawled back along the fence line to get back to the golf course, basically, to the golf shop. Anyway, to sort of fast forward, I knew that I had had something happen to my brain because of what happened. And I had seen actually, my dad had a stroke before, prior to his heart attack. So I kind of knew something had happened to me like that, but I didn't know exactly what. So fast forward, I didn't actually even go to the hospital that night. I ended up, my aunt and uncle came and picked me up, and I got through the night. And I remember I woke up in the morning and I couldn't push the covers off of the bed. And my aunt helped me go into the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror and I literally was like, I did die. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, because I was so white and I look like chocolate chip ice cream because I have so many freckles, but I was so white. It just looked like chocolate chip ice cream. That's like how I describe like my skin. Like I thought that I literally died. And then I was like, uh-oh, this is not where I was yesterday. This isn't a cool thing. So my aunt and uncle finally took me to the emergency room. And when we got in there, they were like, well, we think she just had a heat stroke, blah, blah, blah. But I still couldn't make words. And so I kept saying like, no. And then they were checking my vitals and I had a heart murmur. And they were like, so you have a heart murmur? And I was like, and so my aunt was trying to get a hold of my parents to come to the hospital, which is like an hour away. So everything just started happening really quickly. And then I remember the doctor in the emergency room came back with all the blood tests that they take, like that they have to take when you come in. And he kind of was just like so concerned and looked at me, and he's like, walked up and he looked at me and my aunt and he says, I don't know how she's here right now. Like she should not be here right now. Like she doesn't even have enough actual blood in her system to like be pumping her organs. And so we were like, what? Well, anyway, to make that story short, after about a week, they still couldn't figure out what had caused it at the time. And after a few days, I had some different doctors. I mean, they thought I had cancer. So I had a leukemia test, a spinal tap. They thought I had some disease, some blood disease that like Mediterranean, like Italian people get from the Mediterranean. It was like very rare. They thought I had Addison's disease. They were going all over because they just couldn't figure out what had happened to my system. And I kept, wanting to tell them like, and I can't hear, I can't see, I couldn't make words. So it was just a big baffle to everyone. And then finally one doctor said, well, we got to go in. So they put a camera down my throat. And they found 4 ulcers that were, as they describe it, like the size of grapefruits in my stomach. And they were like, and during this time, I remember they actually they said, you're not going to live, like you have to have a blood transfusion. And I was so wigged out by that. And then I remember like praying and just being confirmed that like God would be, cleansing that blood and I would be okay because I didn't want to take it. So finally they convinced me that like it would be safe for me to have that. But they were like, you're not going to make it if we don't start putting blood into you because you're still losing blood and we can't figure it out. And so anyway, that is what I had lost so much blood through the ulcers over this period of who knows how many months. So we didn't really realize that I had been bleeding internally, probably this last 6 to 8 months. And so I had slowly lost so much blood. But the reason that it looked like I had leukemia was that my body, and I'm just describing this sort of layman's terms, but actually started to eat away at my bone marrow to produce red blood cells that my body no longer had in liquid form, if you will. This is like very layman's terms, but so my bone marrow, that's why they thought I had cancer, because my bone marrow and the test from the marrow, when they did the spinal tap, looked so weird. It mimicked leukemia. And that is what caused me to have the brain injury because I wasn't getting blood and my system was basically just shutting down from the inside out. So, but during this time where everyone was so freaked out, I just wanted to tell them, no, it's going to be okay. Like you told me I could come back here, but I was so like in and out of it, like consciousness, and I couldn't make words. I could hear everyone though. And so, it was just a very interesting time because I was sort of like a fly on the wall to my own life and my family and everything around me. And I remember as I was going in and out of all these testing tubes, CAT scans, MRIs, etc., I had on my arm, back in the day, this will date me, but the like cotton yarn WWJD bracelet, or What Would Jesus Do bracelet. I had it on my arm. And I remember that I just felt like everyone that God had brought to me in that hospital was like a believer. And they would like grab my arm and they would say, it's going to be okay. Like he's here, like this nurse, that doctor. And I would like cry because I couldn't really talk to them, but they knew and I knew, but I just kept getting these confirmations that it was going to be okay. But I was really scared to death that I was going to die. And so it was so painful, like everything I was going through. I mean, I was, sick and scrawny and weighed, 110 pounds. And it just was a crazy, crazy time, especially coming from like a very strong, like athletic person who never had anything happen to her or whatever. It was just pretty crazy. So during that time, once I got out of the hospital, and I still couldn't talk very well, but I got my hearing back and my visual. I was just really dizzy, but I could only stay awake like maybe 5, 6, 7 hours a day. At first it was like 5 hours a day and then it got better. But I could not remember how to do daily things. So at first I was there with my family because this was during the summer. So I was at home and I was sort of healing and they were helping me with everything. But like it was a task to wake up. It was a task to know. I didn't know phone numbers, addresses, or anything. I mean, my memory was gone. And if I went to talk to you, I couldn't make a sentence. And if it did make a sentence, it came out, you doing, Ryan, which I meant to say, hi, Ryan, how are you doing? Like it was very, it just was parts of, but
big Latin, yeah.
Pull things together. But going through that summer, I wanted to go back to college. I wanted to go back to school. And everyone said, oh gosh, don't do it. Like you're not ready. You still can't stay awake. You're going to be on your own. They kind of knew that I couldn't function and they weren't sure how I was going to, but at the same time, I knew it was the best thing that I had to do to get better. It was almost its own form of therapy, if you will, just having to go back into life. Mm-hmm. And so, and they were worried, I think, on how I would be if I couldn't succeed. Like just knowing who I was, they were like, you're going to fail. Like you're going to fail out of school kind of thing. Like just take time off or whatever. And I was like, no, I want to go back. Like I wanted to go back to do the things that I had like told God I wanted to go do. Like I was ready.
Right.
I just knew I wasn't physically ready, but my spirit was like, still like, no, I have something I need to do. And so, I went back to school. I wrote everything down on a piece of paper because we didn't have phones, right? So I took every week, I took a legal pad, divided it up into the days. Every day I wrote wake, eat, brush teeth, shower, et cetera, like all the way through the day. I showed up at the wrong classes on the wrong times, on the wrong days. Like I was lost. I didn't know how to get home sometimes. I literally could only stay awake like 5, 6, 7 hours. So I'd go to class. I did the best that I could. I had to redshirt playing golf because I was pretty scrawny and weak. So I'd go to practices when I could and went back to the gym to get stronger. But I couldn't compete. So I just redshirted. And that was nice because it took a little stress off there, but I still wanted to go back to golf. But and I realized I had no memory because I was just like walking around, not making it where I needed to go most times. And my mom, there was no cell phone. So they were just coming out and I had a cell phone that was about this big. And all I could do that if I hit the first button and I was lost, I could call my mom. And she programmed her like redial number in there. And I hit that button because I was lost a few times. And she helped me. She'd say, what day is it? Where are you? Go outside, read the name of the building. Where are you supposed to be? Pull out your schedule. So she kind of helped me through a lot of those things at times. And I got through it, but I realized that I was going to fail because like I couldn't take tests or anything. Like I couldn't remember my name half the time. So I realized when I was in classes, as the professors were talking or whatever they were showing us or teaching us, as they said things in my mind, stuff started coming through in color. So, I don't even know, like if they were saying something in statistics, like whatever this formula would come through green, and this one came through purple, and this one came through blue, and this came through yellow or whatever. I was like, whatever. So I went to the store and I got those clicker pens. So I had a 4 clicker and then I had like a 12 clicker. So I had like 16 colors and I'd sit up in the front row. And whenever somebody would say something, I just wrote whatever it was, it came in color. And so that's basically how I started relearning. I don't know why, but everything was just color to me. And I remember having to take my first exam. And I was like, this ought to be good. Because I couldn't really study. I just would go to class and I'd go home and I fell asleep at night, like 6 o'clock or 6:30. And I remember taking my first exam and it took me a while to get through it because I was kind of slow. But I got through it and we got it back because, classes are like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So if like I took that class on Monday or whatever, took the exam, we got it back on Wednesday. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be my first F ever in life. And I like picked up the exam. He laid it face down and I picked it up and I went, and I was like, what? That is crazy. And so I had to I'm like, I've had a lot of weird stuff happen. You need to look at it again. So I looked at it again and I was like, what? I aced it. And I was like, that is impossible. So I literally started crying because I knew that it wasn't like me. I was not in my strength anymore because I had no ability to really process. But to make a long story short, so that was my sophomore year. And because I redshirted, I technically had 4 more years. And so for 4 years, I set the curve on every exam I took in every subject possible for 4 years. And I ended up graduating valedictorian at my university. And no, deep down inside, that had nothing to do with me other than I just did the best I could and showed up, right? And did my thing with my color pen. But really, it wasn't about regurgitating information or memorizing stuff or overworking in my own strength because I had none. I was just trying to stay awake for 5 or 6 hours a day at that point. And so that is actually how I started when I got back to the golf course. And I had been thinking a lot about golf. When I went back out, things that I was, it's such a mental game, but it's like very difficult of a skill. Stuff that I never understood before, or never understood what people were saying about how to do things. I all of a sudden could see so clearly like how the body was supposed to move the club, or the club move, or whatever. It was just like everything started coming to me, and it like totally came together. And I saw a lot of things and colors and shapes that I had never processed before. And so that's kind of how to go full circle, how that came into me wanting to be a golf instructor. Because I was like, well, wait a minute, like this is so easy. Why doesn't anyone describe it like this? I just started to see it differently, how I had never seen it before. And so I was very like excited and rejuvenated on like, hold on a minute, I know how to do this now. And so then I should say, when I went to school, I was so bad my freshman year. I mean, it was like the worst golf I ever played. I'm like, I shouldn't even be here. Like, this is disgraceful. And so anyway, I was playing so horribly, but then, as things went on, I like got better, and, now it's like so clear to me. I wish I could go back and play all over again, because, it's different for me now. But yeah, so that was, there's lots of little parts I left out in there, but, basically that was learning to like rest in his strength,
sovereignty.
Right. Yeah. Like, I never really needed to try to do all of that in my own strength, I guess, but for whatever reason I had started to. And so it came back to literally being reliant on him just to get through like daily things. And so, it was pretty cool.
So you went from just redlining, putting everything on your back, redlining, and literally driving yourself into the ground, and probably giving yourself a stroke through just trying too hard, and bad habits like just drinking those things, and really depleted your health, to sitting down, having a conversation with God, kind of getting reassured, and then fighting your way back, and then just trusting in him. And then all of a sudden he delivers far past your capacity. We're setting the curve in every state. It's like I'm almost picturing like the Matrix. She comes out of it just like this different. She's seeing things in colors and
shapes. Yeah.
It's really wild. And I didn't know, like, it wasn't a goal for me. I was just trying to do well. Like, it wasn't a goal to like go graduate valedictorian or anything. I hadn't even thought about it. I just remember one night I was sitting in my room in my house, my senior year, and I got an email, because emails had just started like being the form of communication. I got an email from the dean of the college, and I actually had to like reread it because I thought it was like scam or spam, and I was like, what? And it said, I just wanted to let you know that, you, based on your performance over the last, 5 years, you're actually going to be graduated as a valedictorian. And he said in that letter, and I remember picturing that like the Lord was like going to be right there too. And it just brought me to tears. Like it literally, I remember it dropped me like off my chair that I was sitting at, like to my knees crying, because there was no way for anyone to know the actual struggle that it was for me during those times. The next 4 years or whatever, just to like get through a day. But he said that your family and, your closest friends will have a VIP section at the graduation. And I remembered picturing that like Jesus was going to be sitting in the VIP section next to my family. And it literally just like brought me to my knees and like thankfulness, and just, it was crazy.
Hey, Nicole, I've got one question, and I mean, I've got a million different questions, but I think one that, for anybody watching this, I mean, I got chills through that experience that you had with God. And, What would you say to somebody that's exploring the faith, or maybe that just hasn't crossed the line of faith, knowing what you know and experiencing what you experience? Like, what would you say to that person?
You know that he's there, like he's just always there, and you just have to sometimes slow down enough to just invite him to be where you recognize him. Like he's always there. You know, that never changed. It was about me slowing down and giving up enough to recognize that the whole time he had always been there. Like, why was there this period of time that I thought I could do it another way? And that it's just, you don't have to do anything, right? Like, that's one of the hardest things to understand about faith and grace, right? Like, it's sort of like, well, what do you mean I don't have to do anything? What do you mean I can't really make the wrong choice here? Like that, you know, it's so counterintuitive to our lifestyle to realize that, like, it's a gift that he's there and that he loves you every day. I mean, that's just so, I think that's so counterintuitive to our intellect. I think, and you just never know, like, how he's going to show up, right? Like, I think you have to let yourself, you know, soften your heart enough to see him, like when he's going to show up, you know, because you just never know, honestly. Like, it's the weirdest thing, you know. It's not like there's a time in the day. I think he kind of knocks on the door of everyone's heart, you know. So yeah, it's just I think just trying to open your heart to seeing him even in the smallest ways. Like, he's always there. So I have kind of a cool, it just sort of came to me when you asked that question, when I was saying, you know, you never know how he's going to show up. When I went back to school that first month or two, when I just was literally like, well, couldn't get around, I had some friends at FCA, and Fellowship of Christian Athletes was kind of where I went when I was at school. And we had a Wednesday night, I think it was, where we met every week. And I remember going, and we were supposed to have a special speaker that night. I was like, okay, cool. I mean, we go every week, so whatever. I didn't really know who the speaker was this week or whatever, but I don't remember his name. I don't remember where he was from. I remember it was somewhere back east where he was from, and he has coming to Colorado, and there was a lot of us sitting in a circle, maybe 30 or 40 of us. He asked us to, like, circle up. You know, we sat at it was kind of an auditorium, but he asked us, instead of sitting in the stadium seating, to kind of circle up. And he was telling this story, and I'm sitting with a couple of my girlfriends, and he was telling the story, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's talking about, you know, I wasn't sure I was going to talk about tonight, but on the plane, I was really moved by the Spirit to deliver a message to someone here and to all of you. And I don't know this person, but I know that that the evil one has, like, tried to steal her peace and her joy and her love and just take so much from her. And she's had, like, the hardest year. I mean, he's going on. And I'm just like, this is so horrible. I'm about to cry, and I'm listening. And so he's standing in the middle, and he's like, so I was given a word that I'm supposed to share with her. And he says, I don't know her, but is there, you know, there's this big buildup for like 15 minutes. And he says, is there a Nicole here? And I'm like, he was just talking about me? Like, how? And my friends were like, and they're like, that's you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's like, are you Nicole? And I'm like, yeah. And so now I'm broken in tears, because not everyone there knew what had happened to me either. I kind of was very quiet about it, because, to be honest with you, it was a little bit embarrassing, and just because socially it was hard for me to talk and stuff. So I didn't really like talk about it a lot, or bring it up. I just kind of wanted to try to go back to life as normal as could be. So my girlfriends that were close to me knew. So they're like in tears crying and they're like, go up there. So I got up in the middle and he asked everyone to like hold hands and they were going to pray for me. And he said, I don't know what's been going on in your life. All I know is that whatever I was supposed to come here and do, I'm not doing, and I'm supposed to be sharing this with you. But the Lord is with you and he sees you and he's been with you, and he is not going to let the evil one have any more like say on anything that happens to you in your life. He cannot take that from you. And he gave me 2 words. He gave me Job 42:10, and it said, after Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord made him prosperous once again and gave him twice as much as he had before. And Joel 2:25, it says, I will restore to you the years the locust has eaten, the great locust and the locust swarm, my great army that I have sent among you. And I'm like, literally just like broken, a puddle, like crying my eyes out. And everyone there, all of the other athletes, my friends and him, they all prayed for me. And like, it was the most incredible like moment ever in my life. Like I felt like of all the people in the world, like the Lord like heard my prayer. He knew I couldn't talk. He just knew all of these things. And it really felt to me like he was my shelter, my army. And something that had kind of come at that is I had some friends that teammates or whatever, and they honestly during that time weren't very nice to me because they were like, they kind of had that attitude like, well, you caused it to yourself sort of thing. And I was like, well, I kind of did, but I didn't mean it sort of thing. Like they just weren't very empathetic. And there was a part of me that was like, I really didn't intend to. Like, I liked my life. Like, I was trying to do right. I had no bad intentions. And there was a part of that came out in that word that made me realize, too, that, God is real and love is real and Jesus is real. And his power is always more real than anything that's, like, evil or bad. Because there was a part where I really do feel like there was a little bit of, like, some maybe, like attacking from evil on that side,
malevolence
me a lot. And, that's kind of a lot to share. There were some instances that came up during that period of sickness that it was like super wild where I was like, this is so weird. But like at that moment when I was given those words, I was like, he's right here, like behind me, standing over my shoulder. And I honestly, from that day forward, have always felt like that.
Awesome.
So that was pretty cool. Like, and that's what I mean. Like, you never know, like, when he's going to show up or how he's going to show up. Because, I mean, here was this guy, I think he was, like, from Pennsylvania. Came all the way to, like, FCA in Colorado to, like, tell me something. And he was as baffled by delivering me the message as I was to receive it. Mm-hmm. And so, it was pretty cool. So, and during that time, I realized that, my place there at the university, I wanted to be like this all-American golfer, right? Because I just wanted to be the best at everything. Like that's what I wanted to do. And I realized like that was not my role there at that time. And so during that time when I was healing and coming through all of this, I started doing other things at the university that God had really placed on my heart, and other things for like the student athletes. That they still have some programs there that I started for student athletes, like as they go through school to help them later in life and professionally and stuff like that. And I really, I kind of gave up and said, okay, this is what I'm here to do right now. Like, and I knew that there would be a day where I was supposed to do what I was supposed to do with golf, but it wasn't then. And so that was like opposite of my human plan for sure.
Yeah.
So, what college was that, Nicole?
CU, University of Colorado.
Wow. Okay. And then I have my questions aren't as deep and rooting as Eric's. They're just pretty, this is for the kids listening. So when you saw God, what did you see? Like when you're talking with him, do you have any recollection?
No, just that it was bright.
Okay.
yeah, it was just light. I didn't see anything. I just felt and heard him. Like I heard him, like I'm talking to you guys. I mean, it was so, that's all there was. That was the only sound that there was.
That was it.
And what I piggyback the questions for the kids. Were you scared? Was it scary at all?
No. The only time I was scared was when, after he said get up on the third time, and I woke up. Then fear and pain and things that we know, human beings, all of that was the highest that had ever been.
I sense like when you were describing it the first time, it just sounded like freedom. Like you were like, yeah. It's like, I'm finally okay. I'm at peace. I'm free. Like, I don't have to worry. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah. There's there's nothing to achieve. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, if I would think about like, when you're asking me, like, what would you tell, someone who's like, I think too, growing up in the way that I did, having like a very goal-oriented upbringing, right? I mean, that's kind of how we were raised, like there were goals about how we were going to do tomorrow, the next day. It's sort of like, I think about, like there's this like fine line, right? Of like, goals, and then there's your goals, right? And then there's goals like aligned with where he's leading you. And it's sort of like I was thinking about the other day, when the disciples, when he comes upon them, and the story of like, they're out there fishing, they're working their tails off, right? And they're casting their nets in, and like they can't catch anything, right? I mean, but they're working really hard and they're doing what they should be doing. They're doing everything they should do, right? But they can't do a thing. It's like all that work is in vain. Right? And they're not necessarily doing anything wrong. It's not like they're out on the boat, like sinning, whatever, but it's just,
right.
It's their own place in the water. They're doing their own thing kind of thing, and it's not like you're intending to do anything wrong or whatever, then Jesus comes along and says like, no, keep going, keep working. Yeah. Like, I want you to work. It's not that you just get to sit there sit on your thumbs and do nothing, but, he says, throw your nets over here. And so all of a sudden the work that you're doing and your effort and everything is like, oh my gosh, right? You get so many fish that the boat's going to like, sink.
They produce fruit. Yes.
Yeah. And so there's that. It's not like he's like, oh, just sit in the boat and do nothing. And it doesn't work for you, right? There's like the whole faith works thing, right?
Yes.
When I was younger, I had an understanding of that for whatever reason, by the grace of God, right? And I just sort of did what he wanted me to do and did the best I could where he had me going. And then for that period of time, I was like, no, I'm going to go over there and fish, whether you told me to throw that net over here or not. And that was really the big difference. And then, and so, I think that's just true of everyone. It's like, sometimes you don't intend to have bad intentions. It's just, sometimes you're just not, you don't have your eyes fixed on the right thing. So,
yeah. So that's the two things that stand out to me about hearing your testimony. Like, it's a gift, you receive it. You don't have to do anything. You just have to receive it, just like any gift, as opposed to like you're earning something. And I think that's what makes the walk with Jesus unique, is because it's a gift and all you have to do is receive it, knock, and he will open. So I think you did a really good job with, kind of bringing light to that. And then the second thing that stood out to me was you're talking about like you weren't necessarily sinning, but you were working, grinding, kind of like taking everything on yourself, and you kind of steered away from him. And, and Jesus tells us like his yoke is much lighter than the yoke of the world. So I'm reminded of that here in your story, because you're trying to do it yourself. And there's like some false idols that come in that, because you're like, it's me. I'll work it. I'll do it. And we do all that. And then we lose peace and we lose, what are the fruits of doing that? Like anxiety, you ran yourself into the ground and your health was altered, as opposed to just surrendering and just receiving the gift and kind of going where he wants. So what a powerful message. One of my favorite ones. So I'm so grateful that you took the time to share that with us. I know you might have been a little nervous because of the tens, maybe dozens of people that will be listening,
Yeah.
Both of our moms.
Yeah, we got our parents and old friends, but no, we're growing and we like to poke fun, but we're just grateful to have you on. Was there anything else that you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance to?
No, just agreeing with you, like I think, right? Like sinning, it can look different for every person, right? Like it's not always how we see something on the outside, but yeah, just, not being in alignment with him alone is enough that, it'll just break everything down and basically like cut you out at the knees, so. Yeah.
Well, he came through for you again as you lift the podcast paper. It's an A+. And
Nicole, you're a pro, and this was remarkable and such a story worth sharing that I know is going to touch multiple people. So thank you for being brave enough to do this. And I know sometimes it's not easy about talking about yourself, but you painted a beautiful story and you represented God well. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thanks for everything you guys are doing. It's awesome. So I appreciate you doing. Sending prayers for what you're doing to spread, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah. Thank you guys. We'll talk to you later.